allows you to have more success. Okay, so we've done well in the stance. Now we got to actually play, right? Now we got to drive with force. And I talk about doing through, not to. The reason I talk about driving with force and specifically driving with force through, not to, language is extremely powerful when you are trying to coach an athlete or teach a student or help somebody learn something. Language is extremely powerful in the same sense that I talked about earlier of like, what does hard work actually mean, or what does working harder than other people, than everybody else actually mean? Language is incredibly powerful. And so often in the offensive line world, we talk about stepping, our first steps or our stepping to an angle or stepping to a spot or getting to a spot. And that language can be subconsciously impactful on the athlete, right? Like if I tell them they need to get to a spot in pass protection, that doesn't mean they're going to win the rep if they get to that spot. There are still so many other things that need to happen, right? That's just part of it. And if I leave it at that, they may say, well, coach, I got to the spot, but I still lost. What's wrong? Right. Well, so many other things could happen. Maybe they're in a bad biomechanical position to take on contact. Maybe they're in a bad biomechanical position to to divert forces or apply forces. Right. There's so much more than just. So this is kind of long, and it's kind of offensive line is basically physics and geometry. It's applied geometry and a lot of other things that there's some Irvisms out there, Jax. But it's all to do with forces, and the laws of physics dictate that if I want to get to a certain place in a specific direction, right? If I want to apply a vector force, I have to deliver equal and opposite force to propel myself to get to that spot, wherever that spot may be. So for as an offensive lineman, in order for me to do my job effectively in terms of working through specific angles, everything I do has to be about delivering forces from my body to other places or other people, and controlling forces within my body and controlling the ones that are being applied to my body. So there's everything about how we play is to do with force. Everything, right? A lot of people, for example, teach inside zone, the way they see it, and the way that Coach Yonkis and I see it is a little bit different than other people, which is a little bit different than other people, a little bit different than other people. I don't work on quote unquote inside zone angles. I focus everything about angles and forces. And the same way I teach like gap scheme is about angles and forces. Everything is about forces and the directions that they're being applied. And that's how we need to play, right? So I need to deliver and control forces that are being applied from my body, and I need to control and divert appropriately forces that are being acted upon my body. Because everybody likes to talk about, I've actually luckily Jordan's on this call. I've talked to Jordan a little bit. Jordan's an incoming Laurier recruit coming in to play center next year. I talked to Jordan about, he's talking about training and getting better and getting stronger. And I was like, the big three lifts of, bench, deadlift, squat are all important. Don't get me wrong. But when are we ever on a football field where I can pump, me personally, I can pump 225 for 20-ish now, maybe. When am I ever going to be on a football field in a perfect position, right? Like I sit on the bench and I lock my shoulders in, my hips are in place, my feet are firmly planted on the ground. I got full control of the bar, and I got full control of that bar through the entire set of the reps. When are we ever going to be in a football field in that situation? That's not realistic. And don't get me wrong, those things are important, but we need to teach our athletes how to divert forces, independent hands, up, down, side to side, different angles, in and out. Same with our feet. And we need to be able to match up independent feet, independent hands. It's a very, very skilled position, more so than people ever realize. And it's all to do with forces. So we got to teach them how to drive with force. And this one isn't as much about diverting forces. Diverting forces is very much more, you can use bands. I didn't have bands, which I don't have film on it, but this is much more teaching our athletes how to drive with force. And what Charles Bentley always talks about, force through the ground. In order for me to propel in any angle, I have to apply force through the ground in an equal and opposite direction to get where I want. So the first thing we do, if you have med balls, this is great. If you have weighted balls, this is great. If you have nothing, this is completely fine too. You don't have to do this with med balls. The only reason I do this with med balls for my guys is just to get used to having their hands in specific spots, when we're delivering force to the ground to get us at specific spots. So the first one, we're going to go on one leg. This is simulating driving in a certain direction. I just want them to get the feel first. So we're not actually leaving the ground. My guy in the middle here, he's a first year. He actually messed up the first rep, and he leaves the ground. I don't want guys to leave the ground on the first one. I just want to get to the feel of loading up, right, contracting their muscles, and then putting pressure through the ground with control, which is why I don't want them leaving ground, because it's not about applying maximal force. It's about applying the correct and appropriate force. So this one is just about feeling it. So we do 2 reps, we switch the feet, and we do it again. Notice that all those efficiencies we talked about with the stance in terms of the upper body, my hips and my shoulders are square. My elbows are still tight to my body. My hands are in a good space, and my chin is up, right? All those things that we talked about that are important in our stance are now applying through the course of certain reps. You can see it quickly from the side. And ideally, we're able to do this without being able to put our foot in the ground, right? That's a balance thing, a structural strength, a functional strength thing in our bodies. That if you have a guy that can do this whole progression without ever having to put their off foot on the ground, they are very, very ready to be a good offensive lineman. That is a hard thing to do when you see what we're going to next. So now we're going to leave the ground. So now,
question here. Sorry to break your rhythm there, Coach. I just know
okay, no worries.
I just know you're going to roll for the whole hour, and I won't get too many stops. If I don't get
all good
on a water break, I won't get any. When you speak, of force application and levers, joint mechanics certainly comes into play. How much, and I guess how do you emphasize flexibility training with guys in your group?
Big time. Talking to them about it all the time. One of my first years this year, I'll tie it to mental health, and I'll tie it to creating structure. In the pandemic, it's obviously extremely difficult for athletes because we're so structured as human beings that without our sport, a lot of that structure was taken away. So this first year athlete during our academic tracking meetings was struggling with his sleeping patterns. And I said, you need to create a nighttime routine that's going to help you trigger your brain into this is time to sleep. Me doing this thing for 45 minutes or a half hour or however long it needs to be before is telling my body, tricking my brain into get ready to go to sleep. It's time to go to bed. And for him, that was stretching. And he's turned it into a habit now that he and I are not meeting for academics anymore because we're in the summer and he's working. And he's like, Coach, I stretch every day. That I literally roll out of bed and go to the ground. Like I don't stand up. I go to the ground and I start stretching. Obviously I'm telling him like, you can't push anything. I don't want you to hurt yourself because he's cold. But he stretches and then he stretches again right before he goes to bed at night. And that's part of his nighttime routine, part of his morning routine, waking up. So stretching is definitely important. Mobility is super important too. Joint mobility. The more flexible and the stronger you are around joints, the less likely you're going to have acute injury. So flexibility and mobility are definitely extremely important. Good question. Anything else, Jack, before I get back on a roll?
No, you're good.
Okay. So now we're leaving the ground. So now it's about maximal force, and we want this to go straight up and down. So what we should see is the athlete's foot land pretty much at the same spot they started with, and they should go full maximal, right? We should get full extension through the joints to get them as high as they can get through into the air as we get into this one. So you can see here we landed pretty much in the same spot. Here we landed pretty much in the same spot. Here we landed in pretty much the same spot, which means they're applying forces appropriately. Then it's about being able to then catch that force and divert forces appropriately through our body. This is giving them that feel of, if I get bull rush or I get pressure on one of my shoulders or I get pressure through one of my sides, how am I able to divert that force through my body, right, and control it? Because that's what offensive line is. And again, you can see all three of them. Oh, I got a little toe tap from one of my guys, a little toe tap. And we get perfectly straight up, perfectly straight down, and a catch. Then we switch our feet, right? You can do that at both feet. And sometimes you'll be able to see, we can see this athlete's ability to catch on that other foot isn't as good. And this guy burned out on that leg a little bit. Don't need to see it from the side. Then we can do it with some angles. So now we're going to bound it. They're a little preemptive. So now we're going to load into one leg. So now it's the same thing. We're going to drive with force, but we're going to go through a different angle. So now we're going sideways, and now we got to catch it. So now we're acting, we have different forces acting upon our body and different forces coming out of our body because of the angle we're working through. Things that we talked about make a good offensive lineman in our stances, we still want to do that as we catch. And I might go, I just got an alert saying my internet's unstable, so sorry if I get choppy.
You're all right now.
So for me, I do it a couple each side, just off of the commands of ready, go. You can see my guys burning out a little bit, getting frustrated because he's tilting. That's all that was. We got a side angle, which we don't really need to see. And now again, we'll do it again where we're working off different angles. Now we're going to work on 45s. And I let them do, because of the space available, I let them do this one at their own pace. Make sure you stick it, right? I'm talking about catch it, catch it, catch it, stick it, stick it, stick it, right? I want maximal force both vertically and on that 45. And I want you to stick it without having to put your foot in the ground every time. And I still want that same thing with the med ball. I still want her chin up. I still want her lats engaged. I still want her elbows tight. And I took them for maybe 10 or 15 yards. You can do this with a med ball. You can do it without a med ball. You can do it with a weighted ball. You can do it with tennis balls even. You can do it with anything you want, right? Just focus on making sure those hands are up.
And the nice thing is it's not about the weight, right? Like you could be doing this, like, one thing I look forward to, and I don't know if we'll end up ever getting to do this, but between me and you eventually coaching some 10-year-old offensive linemen, right? I can't wait for this in the park. Other kids are going to be shooting hoops, and Scotto Jr. is going to be sticking the bounding lunge with the bat. It won't be the med ball, though. It'll be the basketball at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So like we can see a difference here. Again, a younger athlete still getting used to it. You can see he has to use the weight available to him to brace to be able to get him there. This is going to apply to poor, this is going to translate, to poor force reallocation through my body, as opposed to this catch, which is going to be a little cleaner. Right. And this is just a young guy. He can do it. This is just a young guy not fully understand what he's trying to get asked of him. And I'm sure I had some words with him after, like, hey, this is what it needs to be. And he fixed it.
You got another good question here from Ben Baxter. Are you focusing on hand position on the med ball during these drills?
Yes, 100%. So you can see a little bit of a difference, again, from the young guy to the older guy in terms of where the forces applied are. So for the younger guy, you can see he's kind of holding it a little more on the side. And I kind of let him get away with it a little bit just because I want the main focus of this drill is much more on the lower half versus the upper half. But as you get older, right, I don't want you blocking with your palms into each other. That independent hand thing we talked about is going to become a lot more difficult. But B, the meaningful contact I'm going to get with my hands and the ability to feel pressures and forces through my hands is going to become a lot more difficult when my hands are here. In addition to this, I know some people teach the up and under, and that's typically where this hand placement comes from. I personally don't like the up and under because it makes you way more prone to holding calls. So if you look at our history, ever since Irv was with us before and since I've taken over, we have very, very few holding calls because we never go up and under. We very, very rarely are ever actually grabbing underneath the shoulder pads because it's just, like, in my opinion, holding is a stupid penalty to take and you don't need to take it. And there are ways, again, you can drill that skill that they don't have to do that. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a great
question. So in terms of this drill, it's not super specific, but it is something I build in all my drills. So you can even see here, like this one, the hands being up in this drill is specifically so they don't push off their leg. And doing stuff off the ground is awesome. You can do this all from stance too, which is what this progresses to. But I have them as if their hands are already out of their stance, so they have to isolate that leg. And what we should see is that back foot should land in front of the line of scrimmage. That is visual confirmation that we are gaining ground on an appropriate angle. And the second cone, we should be right underneath our midpoint, our base of support. That is both visual confirmation that we're applying appropriate force. We're not losing ground. We're not bucket stepping, for lack of a better term. We're not going negative. and we're taking an appropriate angle. So we're delivering appropriate force and we're taking an appropriate angle. So this is a great rep and our hands are in a good spot and we get a great finish, which is awesome. We can do that both ways. I get guys circulating through right at the camera. Garrett's mug, what's up? Right, whether you're a shorter leg guy, a long leg guy, all the same. And then we can do the exact same thing. Now we build it out of a stance. So we've been working on that stance as a skill. We apply that same feel, that same driving force. We do that out of a stance now. And we do it out of a left-handed stance going left and right and a right-handed stance going left and right. Right, we're working on all these skills that are very applicable to O-line, and not at one point yet have we made any contact.
Now, here's one thing, because I know it's if there's athletes watching, and there are, one of the things I'm pumped about right now is there's actually a fair amount of athletes watching this. When you go to do this, you see these guys get out of the stance and they're moving quick and their hands are up and they look like offensive linemen. When you talk about a great finish, I know right now we're talking about generating power, but there's some good clips here for, just general movement as an offensive lineman. Like, we've talked about how you want them to start the drill, and I know it's a 1 hour deal and we're not, going to be on here for 4 hours, but what are you looking for? So Bear gets a great get off, right? You love the application of force to the ground.
Yeah.
What are you looking for as he finishes this rep? Because I think I can see a lot of people doing this, at their high school and doing little parts of it right, but missing a lot of the big stuff.
Yeah. So we should never finish in a position of out of control, and we should never finish in a gradual increase in terms of our bot or in terms of our pad level. So it should be like good pad level, good pad level, good pad level. I'm done, and now I get out of the drill. Right? We want to make sure that our quote unquote our finish is always with good pad level, good hand position. Some guys will take it even a step further, where like Braden would get. He's not doing it because the film's there, but he would get to this spot and he would hold it and freeze it to make sure. And this is something you can do as coaches, where I'm going to freeze the drill to make sure that they're in full control of their body at any given point. So if I freeze it, you should be able to have your foot in the ground and you're not going to lean and fall over. Right? Because if you're leaning and falling over, that means you're not actually in control of your body. You're trusting gravity to do the work for you, which isn't a good way to play. Now Braden here is doing it this way because of the camera, and he's lucky for me, he's not running into me because I'm on the camera here. But we should always finish with that low pad level, and it's essentially a confirmation of my body is in the position I want it to be in. Right? Nobody ever wants to be standing up on a football field. You are going to get hurt, or you're going to get ripped, or you're going to get benched. Right? None of those things we want. So why not practice finishing in a body position we actually want to finish in on a field? Good point, Jack. Thanks. And then we're doing this out of the run. We did some inside zone angle. Now we're going to do some outside zone angle. Right? There's some applicability with outside zone that would be different here, but in terms of the driving through an angle, it's all applicable. Right? It's the same thing, but now we're just driving through a different angle. And then we can also do it, as I work through here, we can also do it out of the pass. So now we're going to be with a med ball. We can start hands on a med ball. We can do this with a med ball, without a med ball. Here for the pass, I did palms on. I still don't want them to push out the knee, but I did palms on for this one to really emphasize the pass fundamental of being able to have palms on our legs and then get the hands up to protect ourselves in the pass game. And you can do that with a med ball too, to add a little bit of weighted resistance. But the same thing here, we're going to drive off of our backside foot to get ourselves to a spot, and then we're going to hold it. Right? And we want all those things. We want our hands in the right place, our inside knee, our toe curl, all those things. We want all those things to be consistent, and those are all things we can see. And then I do it with 2 drives. So now we're transitioning from a ground to a standing, and then we do it out of a stance. Eventually, we do it both sides. And then now we do it out of stance, where we go set 1, and then we go set for 2, drive on an angle, hands get up, and we should finish in the appropriate body position. Cool. Now let's talk. Last 5 minutes, coach. I said I'm going to be rushed.
Hey, you're good. If we go a little over, it's fine. My audience is used to me going a little over.